Now!
It all began on a quiet Friday night at Ridgewood High School, a small Midwestern school known for its sprawling hallways and old, creaky intercom system. The students had gone home hours ago. The janitorial staff had finished their rounds, and the school was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. No one could have imagined that within these familiar walls, something unexplainable was about to happen. At precisely 9:43 p.m., the silence was shattered by the sudden crackle of the intercom. A faint, distorted voice whispered through the speakers, sending shivers down the spine of anyone nearby, if anyone had been there. The voice was chillingly clear, yet impossible to identify. It called out a name, Emily. Come to the gym. No one was in the building. The janitor, who had been double-checking the gym, found it empty. The security cameras confirmed what seemed impossible. There was no one in the hallways. Every door was locked, every corridor vacant. And yet the intercom had spoken, naming a student who had already gone home hours earlier. The initial reaction was disbelief. Staff members assumed it was a prank, perhaps someone hacking the system from the outside. But when the audio technicians examined the intercom, they found nothing. No evidence of tampering, no external signal interference. The intercom was an old, analog system, one that should not have been capable of being hacked so easily. The story spread quickly among the staff and students alike. Teachers recalled that the voice had an eerie quality, almost as if it were coming from the walls themselves, reverberating through the pipes. It wasn't robotic. It wasn't pre-recorded. It was alive, or at least it sounded like it was. A shiver ran down the spine of everyone who heard the recording. What made it even stranger was the timing. The call was made at a time when no human presence could have triggered it. The building was officially locked, and the camera showed no signs of entry. Yet the intercom had spoken, naming a student directly. Those who heard the recording later described an unnatural sense of urgency in the voice, as if it were warning someone, guiding someone to an unseen location within the school. Students who had returned the following Monday were quick to tell the story. They remembered hearing rumors of the strange call while they were at home, and many confessed that the mention of the name Emily had left them unsettled. One student claimed that her younger sister had been the only Emily in the school that year, and hearing the voice call her name, even when she was safely at home, made her feel exposed, as if the intercom knew things no one should have known. Paranormal investigators later visited the school to explore the incident. They interviewed staff and students and inspected the intercom system. Their conclusion? Something unexplainable had triggered the broadcast. The voice could not be traced to any human source, and the analog wiring showed no signs of malfunction. Some experts speculated that residual energy from the school's past might be interacting with the system, manifesting as sound. Others warned that it could be the spirit of someone who had died on the property long ago, trying to communicate. The school itself has a long history. Ridgewood High was built in the 1950s, and over the decades, it had seen its share of tragedies. Accidents, illnesses, and even a few deaths had occurred within its walls. Staff members recalled that, in the very same gym the intercom had called out to, a teacher had passed away suddenly during a basketball practice decades earlier. Some believed that the spirit of the teacher might be lingering, attached to the school, using the intercom as a way to reach the living. The recording of the intercom broadcast has since circulated online, shared by those who wanted others to experience the chilling sound. Even listening to it now sends a shiver through the body. It is a voice that seems almost sentient, aware, and deeply personal. Each time it says the name, it feels as though it knows the person it calls. And that knowledge is what makes it terrifying. By the end of the investigation, Ridgewood High had implemented safety protocols, locking down the intercom system and monitoring it more closely. Yet, many who worked there admit they still feel uneasy walking the hallways after hours. They report faint whispers and the occasional crackle over the speakers. even when the system is turned off. For them, the first strange broadcast was only the beginning. It was the opening chapter of a story that would soon grow darker, more mysterious, and far more personal for the students and staff of Ridgewood High. The first strange broadcast is now legendary in local paranormal circles. It remains one of the most documented and debated cases of school-based hauntings in the United States. What triggered the intercom that night? Was it a prank, a technical anomaly, or something far more sinister? No one knows for sure. But for those who were there, the memory of the voice calling Emily, "Come to the gym," is etched into their minds. A chilling reminder that some places, even familiar ones, may never be truly empty. After the initial intercom broadcast at Ridgewood High, the story quickly spread among students, teachers, and even parents. At first, everyone thought it was a one-time anomaly, just a strange glitch or a prank by a tech-savvy student. But that belief did not last long. Over the following weeks, the intercom continued to speak, and this time it named specific students. It always happened at night when the school was officially empty. The voice would come over the speakers, clear and deliberate, calling out names of students who were not even on campus that day. Each announcement sent a chill through the faculty monitoring the system. The first time it happened, it was a single name: Daniel. Come to the auditorium. The administrators immediately checked the student roster. Daniel had already left town for a family weekend. Cameras showed no movement in the hallways. The intercom, however, had called his name. The pattern continued. Over the next few nights, other students' names were called. Sometimes the voice would whisper them softly. Sometimes it would call them in a tone that sounded almost urgent, as though the school itself were warning them. What terrified staff and students most was the seeming accuracy of these announcements. Names were never random. They corresponded to real students, often ones who had been recently absent or had minor incidents earlier in the day. Rumors began to spread among students like wildfire. Some claimed the intercom was haunted. Others speculated it was a hacker with too much time on their hands. But the repeated calls, the patterns, and the precision made it impossible for anyone to dismiss. Students started reporting feeling watched while walking the empty halls after school. Even those who had never experienced the intercom directly said they could sense an unnatural presence. Parents were understandably alarmed. Teachers held emergency meetings, trying to reassure families that the school was safe. Yet, some of the students who had their names called reported unexplained events at home. Doors left open when they had been closed. Objects moved from their original place. Even cold drafts in rooms with sealed windows. The intercom's announcements had spilled over into their lives in ways that no one could explain. The voice itself remained untraceable. Audio specialists were brought in to record and analyze the broadcasts. Their equipment picked up frequencies beyond normal human speech, subtle distortions that made the voice almost ethereal. It did not resemble a student, teacher, or even a recording. It had a depth and texture that suggested intelligence behind the sound. It wasn't just calling names, it was choosing them. As the incidents continued, the legend of Ridgewood High grew. Students began referring to the voice as the whispering teacher, a nod to stories of a faculty member who had died tragically in the school decades earlier. Old yearbooks confirmed the teacher's presence, and historical newspapers documented the death. Though the teacher had been gone for years, the intercom seemed to echo their voice, or at least something connected to them. The psychological effect on the students was significant. Many reported anxiety and fear, some refusing to enter certain classrooms at night, while others slept with lights on at home. A few students said they had dreams that mirrored the intercom's messages, with a dark figure calling their names in empty hallways. Whether these dreams were a manifestation of fear or a supernatural connection remained unclear, but they contributed to the growing tension. Local media caught wind of the story, amplifying the legend nationwide. Interviews with students and staff showed genuine fear and confusion. One student tearfully recalled the night. Her name was called. I knew I wasn't there. I was at home, but when I heard it, I felt like the school knew everything about me. It wasn't just a voice, it was a warning. Investigators continued to examine the system. Wiring, intercom hardware, and electronic interference were all ruled out. There was no logical explanation for the targeted announcements. Paranormal experts suggested the possibility of residual energy, the lingering consciousness of someone who had died on the property, interacting with the intercom system. Skeptics dismissed it as coincidence, but even they could not explain the specificity and frequency of the calls. The phenomenon known as the names that haunt became a defining moment in Ridgewood High's haunted reputation. It was no longer a single unexplained broadcast. It was a pattern, a presence, and a warning. The intercom had shifted from being a tool of communication to a conduit of something else entirely. Something that knew the students, watched them, and perhaps even cared for them in a way that was terrifyingly unnatural. By the end of this period, the school administration faced a difficult choice. Should they investigate further, potentially endangering students and staff, or shut down the intercom system entirely? They opted to monitor it more closely, installing additional cameras and audio recorders, but the voice continued. Every time a name was called, the school's reputation as one of America's most mysterious and haunted high schools solidified. The names that haunt left an indelible mark on the Ridgewood High community. It was more than a ghost story. It was a living legend, a paranormal event that bridged past and present, and a warning that in some places, even empty hallways are never truly empty. Once the repeated intercom broadcasts had captured the attention of students, staff, and parents, Ridgewood High administration realized that the situation could no longer be dismissed as a prank or a technical glitch. The strange events were escalating, and fear was spreading through the community. The names of students continued to be called over the intercom late at night, often with a tone that was urgent, almost pleading. Something had to be done. The school reached out to experts, both technical and paranormal. Audio engineers were the first to arrive, tasked with determining whether the intercom system had been hacked or malfunctioning. They carefully inspected every wire, checked the analog controls, and ran tests using state-of-the-art equipment. Everything appeared normal. The system showed no evidence of tampering, no rogue signals, no unusual electrical interference. Yet the broadcasts persisted, clear as day, often naming students who were nowhere near the building. In addition to the audio experts, a team of paranormal investigators was invited to explore the school after hours. Their presence gave a sense of legitimacy to the fears of students and staff alike. The investigators brought EMF meters, digital recorders, night vision cameras, and a range of other equipment designed to capture evidence of supernatural activity. Each night, the team would position themselves in the hallways, classrooms, and especially near the intercom hub, waiting for another broadcast. Their first night was uneventful. The building seemed quiet, almost unnaturally so. The fluorescent lights flickered occasionally, and the hum of the ventilation system was the only constant sound. Then at 11:07 p.m., it happened. The intercom crackled to life once again. A voice unmistakably human yet distorted in a way that defied explanation called out, "Sarah!" The library. The investigators immediately reviewed their cameras. The hallways were empty. Every room, including the library, showed no sign of anyone present. The technicians played back the audio. Advanced software confirmed that the sound was genuine. It was not pre-recorded. The voice contained subtle modulations, natural pauses, and inflections that made it impossible to replicate artificially. The investigators recorded the event and noted the timing. It matched the historical patterns of previous broadcasts. Something was using the intercom as a medium, and it was intelligent, deliberate, and selective. Interviews with students and staff revealed another disturbing detail. Some of the students whose names were called claimed to have felt an invisible presence in the building, even when they were at home. Objects in their rooms were slightly displaced. Doors creaked open and lights flickered unexpectedly. One student described a sensation of being watched through the walls, a feeling that intensified when she tried to sleep. The investigators recorded these statements, noting the psychological impact of the events as well as the physical evidence. Over the course of several weeks, the team conducted controlled tests. They attempted to simulate conditions under which the intercom would activate on its own. They monitored every wire, tested the analog signal flow, and even replaced components temporarily. Still, the broadcasts continued. Some nights, the intercom spoke with an almost conversational tone. Other nights, it whispered names so faintly that only the most sensitive microphones could detect them. The paranormal investigators began to formulate a theory. Ridgewood High had a long history, dating back to the 1950s. Over the decades, the school had witnessed accidents, illnesses, and even a few sudden deaths. One such incident involved a teacher who had died unexpectedly in the gym while supervising basketball practice. It was speculated that the teacher's spirit, or perhaps residual energy, had somehow imprinted itself onto the building's intercom system. The team suggested that the broadcasts were not random, but rather intentional attempts to communicate or even warn the living. To test their theory, investigators placed recordings of the teacher's voice near the intercom system. They played them repeatedly throughout the night, hoping to provoke a response. Remarkably, the intercom did react. At 2:13 a.m., the voice called out another student's name, one that had not been targeted before. The timing and selection seemed influenced by the playback, hinting at a connection between the intercom's activity and the history of the building. Students, parents, and staff watched as the investigation unfolded. News crews covered the story, interviewing witnesses who described the feeling of an unseen presence moving through empty hallways. Many agreed that the school had changed in subtle ways. The air felt heavier. Footsteps echoed oddly, and the intercom system now seemed alive, as if aware of its surroundings. By the end of the investigation period, Ridgewood High had implemented heightened monitoring. Cameras were upgraded, sensors installed, and access to the building after hours strictly controlled. Yet the intercom continued its broadcasts on occasion, proving that the source remained beyond technological control. Investigators concluded that whatever was using the system was intelligent, persistent, and intimately tied to the school's history. The investigation at Ridgewood High cemented the legend of the ghost in the school intercom. It was no longer a story about a strange voice. It was a documented series of events, with audio recordings, eyewitness testimonies, and physical phenomena that could not be explained by modern science. The haunting became a case study in the United States for paranormal experts, school administrators, and anyone fascinated by the unexplained. Ridgewood High had transformed from a typical Midwestern school into a symbol of mystery, fear, and enduring curiosity. The investigation proved one undeniable truth: some voices, once connected to a place, never truly fade. As the investigation into the Ridgewood High intercom broadcasts continued, staff and students began to dig deeper into the school's history. What they discovered added a chilling layer to the story, one that would become known as the legend of the ghost teacher. The school, established in the 1950s, had been a cornerstone of the small Midwestern community. Over the decades, generations of students had passed through its hallways, unaware that some of the past might still linger. Among the most striking events recorded in old yearbooks and local newspaper archives was the sudden death of a beloved teacher, Margaret Hollis, who had tragically passed away during a basketball practice in the gymnasium in 1967. She was only 34 years old. Staff members who had worked at the school for decades recalled stories about Ms. Hollis. She was known as a dedicated educator, strict but caring, who often went the extra mile for her students. According to old accounts, she had been supervising a late evening basketball practice when she suffered a sudden heart attack on the court. Students present at the time described the scene as chaotic. Some said they heard her last words before collapsing, an attempt to call out to her students, to guide them even in those final moments. It was this detail that fascinated paranormal investigators and fueled speculation about the Intercom broadcasts decades later. Could it be possible that Miss Hollis's spirit had somehow remained within the walls of the school? And more importantly, could she have found a way to use the old intercom system to continue communicating with students long after her death? The investigators revisited the recordings of the intercom, listening carefully to the voice patterns. Some experts claim to detect subtle similarities between the broadcasts and the archival recordings of Ms. Hollis's voice, captured in public announcements and yearbook recordings. While the resemblance was not exact, distorted by decades, and perhaps by the supernatural, it was enough to suggest a possible connection. Students, hearing about the teacher's tragic history, began to interpret the intercom messages differently. No longer purely frightening, the broadcasts took on a protective tone in their eyes. Names were called not to scare, but perhaps to warn. Some students reported narrowly avoiding accidents or dangerous situations on days their names were called. Whether coincidence or intervention, the perception that the voice had an underlying purpose spread quickly through the school. Local legends also grew around the gymnasium where Ms. Hollis had died. Rumors circulated of a cold presence near the basketball court, lights flickering, and whispers that could be heard faintly even when the building was empty. Some students claimed that the intercom broadcasts always referenced areas near the gym, or that the voice would occasionally echo phrases reminiscent of instructions she had once given during class. For many, these were not mere coincidences. They were signs that the spirit of the teacher had imprinted on the building itself. Paranormal experts describe this phenomenon as a form of residual energy, where intense emotions or traumatic events leave an imprint on the environment. In Ms. Hollis's case, her dedication to her students, combined with the suddenness of her death, may have created a spiritual imprint that interacted with the school's intercom system. According to some theories, this residual energy could manifest as sound, targeting students who needed guidance or warning in ways that could not be explained by conventional science. The legend became a topic of discussion in classrooms, hallways, and local media. Students shared personal anecdotes, some frightening, others oddly comforting. One senior recalled, "I was walking home after practice, and I thought about the intercom calling my name. Later, I almost tripped on a loose sidewalk stone, but I caught myself. I don't know if it was the teacher or just luck, but it felt like someone was watching over me." Stories like this cemented Ms. Hollis's image as a benevolent but restless presence within the school. Administrators, while cautious, recognized the impact of the legend on the student body. They worked to ensure safety while respecting the historical significance of the events. Some even incorporated the story into school tours, using it as an educational tool to teach students about local history, critical thinking, and the role of folklore in communities. The legend of the ghost teacher transformed Ridgewood High from an ordinary school into a site of fascination. Paranormal investigators, journalists, and curious visitors came from across the country to witness or study the phenomenon firsthand. Documentaries were filmed, articles were written, and the story of the intercom broadcasts became part of American paranormal lore. Even today, decades after Ms. Hollis's death, the intercom occasionally broadcasts names late at night. Teachers and students who have worked at Ridgewood High describe a sense of continuity, as though the school itself remembers her, and the voice calling through the Intercom is a reminder that the past is never truly gone. The legend of the ghost teacher remains a central piece of the Ridgewood High mystery. It is not simply a tale of fear. It is a story of dedication, loss, and the idea that some bonds, especially those forged in care and responsibility, may transcend even death itself. For Americans fascinated by haunted schools, the Intercom broadcasts at Ridgewood High are both a warning and a testament. History, emotion, and spirit can linger in the most unexpected places, speaking to those willing to listen. As the school year drew to a close, Ridgewood High remained the center of intense fascination. Students, staff, and even parents continued to talk about the mysterious Intercom. Broadcasts that had haunted the halls for months. The voice, eerie yet strangely purposeful, had become more than a local legend. It was a phenomenon that captured the imagination of the entire community. But the most chilling chapter was yet to come. It happened on the last night of the school year. Only a skeleton crew of custodians and security personnel were present, preparing the building for summer closure. The intercom, which had been unusually silent for several nights, suddenly crackled to life at 11:59 p.m. The voice was stronger this time, more deliberate and unmistakably clear. Every speaker in the building broadcast the same words: "Class dismissed. Forever." The announcement reverberated through empty hallways, echoing off walls, lockers, and gym bleachers. Cameras captured flickering lights, and sensors recorded a spike in unexplained energy near the intercom hub. Security personnel reported a heavy, almost tangible feeling in the air, like the weight of history pressing down. It was as if the school itself had exhaled one final definitive statement. Teachers who had heard the final broadcast described a mix of awe and fear. Some whispered that the voice had changed slightly, carrying a tone of finality, almost maternal in its care. It was the same voice that had called students' names over months, warning, guiding, or perhaps protecting. But this time, it had declared an ending. No more broadcasts, no more names. It was as if the ghost, or whatever force had been using the intercom, had finally completed its purpose. In the days following the broadcast, the school administration conducted thorough inspections of the intercom system. Technicians found no anomalies, no traces of tampering, and no explanations for the strange spike in activity during the final night. The system was functioning normally, yet everyone agreed that something extraordinary had occurred. Paranormal investigators considered the event the closure of the haunting, a final act that solidified Ridgewood High as a historic site for supernatural phenomena. Students returned the following fall with a mix of trepidation and excitement. Some were curious to see if the intercom would ever speak again, but it remained silent. The legend of the ghost teacher, Margaret Hollis, had transitioned from active haunting to enduring legacy. Students shared stories of narrowly avoiding accidents after hearing their names called, reinforcing the perception that the intercom had served a protective purpose. The story was no longer only about fear, it was also about care, caution, and the invisible threads that connect past and present. Local media continued to cover Ridgewood High, sending journalists and paranormal enthusiasts to document the site. Podcasts, YouTube documentaries, and online articles explored the mystery, interviewing students, teachers, and investigators. Audio clips of the intercom broadcast circulated online, with the final announcement, "Class dismissed. Forever," becoming the most chilling and widely shared piece of evidence. The story attracted attention far beyond the Midwestern town, turning Ridgewood High into a symbol of American paranormal intrigue. Despite the attention, the school remained functional. Administrators emphasized safety, ensuring students could learn without fear, while quietly respecting the legend that had grown around the intercom. Teachers often used the story as a teaching moment, combining lessons in history, critical thinking, and folklore. Students were fascinated, knowing they attended a school where the past was alive in whispers, echoes, and the memory of a dedicated teacher who never truly left. Over time, the final broadcast became a cautionary tale for the community. New students were told the story of the intercom before entering the building after hours, learning that Ridgewood High was no ordinary school. It was a place where history, tragedy, and mystery intertwined. Alumni carried the legend with them, recounting the events to friends, family, and even on social media, ensuring that the ghost teacher's story would not fade. Psychologists studying the events noted an interesting phenomenon. Students who were aware of the broadcasts often reported heightened awareness, sharper instincts, and even a sense of protection. Some argued it was purely psychological, a form of heightened vigilance caused by belief in the haunting. Others suggested that the intercom's influence, or Margaret Hollis herself, had a real, lingering effect. Regardless of the explanation, the impact on the school community was undeniable. Today, Ridgewood High continues to operate as a fully functional school. The intercom remains silent, but its history has cemented the building as a unique landmark in American paranormal lore. Students walk the halls with a sense of respect, aware that they share space with the echoes of the past. Staff recount the story to each new generation, ensuring that the legend of the ghost teacher remains alive. The final broadcast and legacy marks the conclusion of Ridgewood High's most mysterious chapter. It is a story of warning, guidance, and enduring presence. Margaret Hollis, through the intercom, became more than a teacher. She became a symbol of vigilance, care, and the idea that some bonds, formed in life, can transcend death. The echoes of her voice remain in memory, whispered through the corridors, reminding everyone that the past is never truly gone. Some halls are never empty, and some voices never fade. Please subscribe my channel for more interesting horror story.